Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is a type of exercise right here that I really enjoy doing, and I think it's really effective in terms of the, I don't know, kind of remote teaching process. These are some scenes sent to me by Evie. Thank you, Evie. I have no idea what scenes these are, and what I'm going to do is finish them off the way that I see fit and try to do so, I don't know, somewhat minimally. I don't want to affect these too much in terms of the spirit in which they were created. Okay, so we have three pieces right here. It looks like they're on a satin type of cardstock. It doesn't look matte to me. All right, so we have three pieces right here. They look pretty good in terms of the richness and color, the composition, and everything like that. She has it down to even the snowfall here. So, okay, no, there hasn't been any retention of white, so I don't think I can do things like the white pigment ink effect in here. Maybe a little bit, but that's one of those things that I usually do. I think they could be spray sealed, and then the contrasts in these will come out a little bit more, kind of a little bit more in the spirit of what they look like when they were freshly stamped. Okay, but we're going to try to amp these up. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll take some before and after shots, and you can kind of decide on if you like them or not. It looks like the shadows can be enhanced a touch more. But the thing about taking pieces from, I would say, kind of maybe a little bit unfinished to someone's eye, she felt like maybe these can be, something could happen in these a little bit more. And that's what it usually is. The difference between one that feels to the creator a little bit more incomplete, too complete. It's usually, I don't know, it's usually a really minimal visual effect. You could work on them, it depends on what size these are. These are, I don't know, these look like about, I don't know, these look like 3.5 by 5s or something like that. But it just depends on how large they are. but it's usually the increase of certain things, okay? Now, I've done this before, but in visual pieces, we have ranges of certain things, okay? There's hue, okay, which is color, what colors there are, and you can break down color into things like temperature, okay, warm and cool. Now you can see on here, she does have warm and cool on here. So that has already been taken care of, okay? And then there's intensity. And in intensity, what we're talking about is the range of dull to bright, okay? And that's different than value, which is light to dark, okay? You can have a very dull yellow, or you can have a very bright yellow. Like a pastels are dull colors, and then you have things like really intense colors, like something like this, as opposed to like a. Oh, let me just grab something here real fast. Like a memento, this is a very pastel, dull color. It doesn't mean dull in terms of interesting. It just means it's a little bit more diluted or something like that. And this one would be very bright, okay? Colors that have a lot of saturation in them, okay? All right, now looking at these pieces right here, they have a pretty good range. Like some of these greens in here are kind of more of the duller tone, and then you have some brighter tones somewhere, where, like this blue right here is very bright, okay? And there's kind of a muted tone in here where kind of that yellow has overlapped into the blue. This yellow right here has some orange in it, and it's kind of overlapping into that blue there. And that kind of mutes it down. The browns in here are definitely a little bit more muted in terms of the range of intensity. So the intensity right here is something that we can potentially increase a little bit. And then we have value. Now, value is the biggest area in which some pieces can be kind of amped up. Okay, now she has some foreground down here in black, okay? I think that this one right here, I suspect, could be a pigment ink black pad right down here, okay? But down here, that's the dye-based black, okay? And it has dried to a muted look. So you can also call that a very dull black. It's more of a gray. All right, so on something like this, I think we can safely figure that we can amp up the range of values in here. Everything in here is fairly dark, but you have the illuminated rocks right down here and that illumination in the sky, which is good. She has created a range in tones from this. But this range in values going from, let's say this is completely white right here. There's no white in here, but I'm just talking her range right now, okay? And this is black, okay? Sorry, can't read that. I ran out of space here. But her range goes from something like this right down here. That's like that beige, okay? And it's going up here. The darkest black right here looks about like an 80% black, okay? But I think we can take this an extra 20% all the way to, pretty much 100, okay? And that's adding in 20% more of a range of values in here. I would say that with all of these right here. Value is a really big key, okay? All right, now the other types of things that we can look at is she has some textures running in here. The images themselves have textural qualities in them, okay? But it's what we do with our media that we kind of amp that up. We create textures in the sky, in the this really fantastic texture down here in the water. It almost looks watercolor down here. But so texture, we have a range of soft to, let's say crisp or hard, okay? God, my writing is really bad today, but okay, now so on these right here, one of the things that I'm seeing is that there are sharp elements in here. The black images in here really got muted, okay? And it's not because of technique or anything like that. It's just the media that was used on there has muted out. I think it looks pretty good like that, though, because it kind of pushes them back. But here again, kind of these lighter versions of black against a dark area in the background. What you're doing is you're decreasing the contrast between image and background, okay? So that kind of softens things in it a little bit like that because the silhouettes of the images aren't as crisp. So I think that right in here, the textural range goes to about crispness about right here. Let's say this is the full range right here. So this area right here, this small little range right here on both value and texture are two areas of these particular cards. I'm not saying just in cards in general, people's scenes, okay? But it's within these ranges that we can often kind of increase things. Now the softness too on here, I would say there's soft elements like within the color applications in here, okay? And I think they probably go to here. We could potentially get some of this in here, you know? So we can increase this one both ways potentially, okay? And I don't know, I guess we could amp up things like this. With this white down here, that would represent snowfall to me, I think. So we could use something like the Dr. Martens in here. Same thing with this. Now, this one up here, she has these could be highlights down here. But I'll show you what we can do in this green area as well. We have some other pens that we can use and do things kind of on a minimal basis, okay? Maybe it's not minimal. Visually, it'll be very effective, but in terms of the techniques used, you know, we won't have to do a lot in terms of the time spent on these. Okay, so I'm going to take some photographs of these so on the video we can kind of show some befores and afters. And I don't know, maybe we will do some spray sealing on these as well. We can get some, I think on these, I think we can do some tonal additions with the additional inks, okay? We can even use alcohol pens on these to add in some shadows. And then, now that's going to kind of look out of place because these are very dry. And then we're going to be applying some wet media to it. And that'll look fairly intense after it's applied. But then it'll kind of mute down again. She already has some really good, she has got some great vignettes running in here. But I'm going to create a little bit of a stronger vignette, you know, to increase, again, the value right here, okay? And going from, to bump up this 20% range of potential value increases on here. Okay, so let's see what we can do with these, and let's have some fun here. Thanks again, Evie, for submitting these. Now, what I do with these is after I'm done, I send these back to the stamper, and hopefully in this video, you know, if she likes them, you know, it'll give her some potential ideas on the different types of things she can do on future cards. Now, all the compositions are going to be different, but you know, she can pick and choose, you know, whatever I do as far as applications to do on her own pieces from then on. Okay, so let's take a look and have some fun here. Okay, let's start off with this piece right here. This is a really good composition right here, but I think it could be a little bit more full. Okay, now one of the things that I'm noticing here is I don't know what stamps she has. I'd have to go look at her orders or whatever, but she can kind of mix and match sets a little bit more. Well, actually, she has the reeds down here from this set, but see, this set right here is, these stamps are in set number 9. This one's in 6. And see these pine trees in the background? I could use more of these in the foreground to push depth. Okay, these are some larger pines. They're the same ones, the pines and rocks down here. You know, so that's should be taken into consideration as well. Kind of cross, you know, mix things a little bit. These sets, for the most part, weren't designed around each other. I put the sets together after the fact. Okay, now, I don't know what pads um, have been used, or that they have in their line, okay? I can only use the ones that I have, too. So, this isn't brand specific, okay, in terms of the additions that I do here. But here are some different types of pads here. The Marvies I'm going to apply on here because I just know that they'll kind of penetrate on here. Okay, now I don't have some darker blue pads of another brand other than, say, Memento. I do have some re-inker ones, distress ones, and those can be used as well. But let's just go on here, and like I said, mix and match, okay? The types of things that I do here, though, you wouldn't want to mix and match type. You're not going to substitute like a dark blue dye-based ink that I do on here with a dark blue pigment ink, or you know what I mean, something like that. Potentially you could, but if you're going for that same type of effect or application methodology, then stick with this type of ink. So here's some, these are just dye-based inks right here. Okay, so let's create a little bit of a stronger vignette on this one. Now, I probably should apply a little bit of a base ink on here because these are completely dry here, and I usually like to work from kind of light tones into darker tones. So let's moisten these surfaces a little bit more so that it makes the darker colors easier to blend in, okay? Now I'm just going to be doing kind of these darker ones around on the edges right here. But let's kind of go in and get some pretty decent coverage with this light one here, okay? Now see, it looks like it's making it darker right here, but that's just because it's wet. This will dry, and it will not be very dark if I just stuck with this one ink right here, okay? And like I said, I don't know what brand of inks. There are different characteristics with certain brands of inks, but I try to not, emphasize any one particular brand, unless it's a specialty ink, which kind of needs to be used for different types of, specialty purposes. Okay? All right, so I have gone in here, and I have brought in my colors about, I don't know, 1.5 inches or so in here. I don't want to go over that yellow area, okay, with the blue. It'll make it look, I don't know, that's not a pure yellow, but it's a little bit more of a warm yellow, but we don't want to kind of eradicate her really great light and reflected light creation that she's created in here, okay? All right, now in here, I will take some of this darker blue. Now I'm with the Memento Danube blue, okay? And I'm coming in here a little bit more around on the shadows right here, okay? So I often have this kind of area coming in here like that to create a little bit more separation between surface and sky, if they're indeed those two areas within a piece, okay? Down here too, see down here on these rocks, what I'm doing is I'm creating more of a kind of a base, a foundation for them, okay? Now I can see as this dries, it's not very dark, but don't worry about that, okay? It's not a lost cause, because what we're doing here too is we're kind of saturating the paper a little bit more with some moisture, okay? But that's what we want to do. We want to build things up. Okay, let's go with the blue. I'm not sure if that's I think this is just a number 3 Marvy blue here. It's a little bit more of a navy. I think this is pretty much the color that she has probably seen when she did this piece, okay? Or not the color, but the value of it, the darkness, okay? And I can see these colors are just drying. And that's what this paper does. It's this kind of more satiny. I don't know, it could be a matte too. I'm not sure. But they're absorbent, okay? So you have less of that ink kind of remaining on the surface than when you freshly stamped it too. All right, down here I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of the light on those rocks for some anchoring shadows here, okay? All right. So see this? We're kind of increasing that value now. We're making everything on the right down here a little bit darker. I have a video on easy lighting schemes, and you can see what I mean, but just kind of a rough idea. Here's your card right here, okay? And I usually keep kind of an area of light up here and an area of reflected light down here. Now these two areas might change. There might be a very small one up here, larger circle down here, small area up here, small area here. Doesn't matter. It could be a small area of light down here and a large area of light source up here. But this area's around in here. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing on, like, I don't know, 80% of my pieces, okay? It looks like this. There's dark, 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 okay? So mostly the four corners, and then you have these areas creeping in like this. But now sometimes, just to make different types of variations on this, sometimes I'll create this too. You just divide these areas up like that. You know, you can have this one right here over to the side and, you know, just kind of create this, and all that can be dark. You can have the lighting over here, so it creates kind of a diagonal light pattern. But to create light, you're just kind of creating shadows here and here, okay? Or whatever, you know, it could be one area of light. It just, you know, but that's just basically what's going on. It makes it really easy to create light, but you just have to retain your lighter areas. Now these areas in here do not mean just white. Those areas are just lighter, okay? And these areas around on the side could be darker, okay? All right, so I'm going with the Prussian blue. Prussian blue is very, very dark in terms of the dark blue hues out there in the stamping kind of ink world. Okay. Now see that right there? That's kind of harsh, but don't worry about it. That's going to dry out. That's not going to be that dark. I know it on this paper when it dries out. All right. But what happens, though, too, when we take these areas around on the edges like this, on the perimeter, and we make them darker like that, we're not making the area lighter. Okay, that would require like ink removal, right? But when we make these areas on the perimeter a little bit darker like this, and that doesn't mean you have to go this dark. This is just an example. You can have a scene that's pastel, okay? But what it does is it makes the interior areas seem one step lighter by contrast, okay? All right, that is that. Let me try this. I don't know if I used the... Did I use the number 10 blue already? I might have. Let's use a little bit more of that. I want to amp things up if I can, intensity-wise here, too. Yeah. Okay. Let's get a little of this in the water here, too. Yeah, that looks good. Now, this is going to dull out, so... That's one thing with certain types of papers. You kind of have to wait and see kind of the end result upon drying. You can heat set and kind of expedite the process, though, too. Heat setting won't, you know, you won't lose anything that that you've created. You'll just kind of get, you know, a little bit of a head start on what it's going to look when it's dry. Okay, so that we have that right now. Do you see what's kind of happening? I'm just kind of altering this a little by little. Okay, that is that. Now, what she has done is she has stamped out our imagery in black, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off the piece with that same hue, and that can often it can bring imagery together, and it can bring the visuals together a little bit more too, by having that same value or light element into it, okay? All right, so see that right there? When I say light element, you know, if you see black, it means that some light is hitting that object. In this case, it's gray. All right, so light is hitting that gray and coming back to your eye, in theory, okay? I mean, even on finished pieces, but that's what's happening out in nature. You're seeing the reflection of something bouncing back. If you were in complete darkness, you wouldn't be able to see those objects because no light is hitting that. So, we're creating shadows, in other words. Or you can think of it like that. All right, so see that black in there? See what that's starting to do? It's starting to contain her composition more too, in terms of kind of a natural framing device. All right, I'm hitting it down here. I'm really anchoring these pines and rocks down here. Okay, now on these pieces, and one of the things I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do something like I'm going to try not to add in additional imagery. Okay, so it's not like, hey, we can improve this thing. Here's 3 new images or something like that. I'm going to try to use the images that I know she has based on these 3 submissions here. Okay, I really like this look right here. I think it's starting to kind of round things or make things look a little more like volumes too with this black here. See, I'm kind of adding this. See how you kind of blend it in on the sides and you kind of stay in those areas, okay? You really use the dry version of this too, so you can get much lighter applications of it too. And I think this is making those areas pop, okay, in terms of contrast. Don't you think those areas are really standing out much lighter visually? We didn't make them lighter, but we made the areas around them a little bit darker, or we've added a darker element into the scene, which is this kind of nice vignette frame, okay? Now I'm using a Marvy black. Now if she used the same black that she used, it might dry dull. Now this Marvy is going to dry duller than what it looks now too, freshly, applied and wet, okay? But you might try other things. You can try like a pigment ink or something like that. If you do something like that, make sure it's kind of the last thing you do, because it's a little bit harder. And they're also very thick, so be careful that you don't just kind of start applying it and then you have you've lost all of your lighting underneath it too, okay, or something like that. So just apply very kind of methodically and carefully if you're talking about doing something like that. Okay. But look at this I'm going about, I don't know, about a ½ inch on the corners like that. And that corner area like this, okay, is really making that area pop out at me. Look how much kind of deeper and more saturated this is. And again, I'll do a comparison photo. Okay, now, one of the things I have here is I pulled out my Pines and Rocks stamp right here. All right. Now, I don't know if she has some pigment ink black. I assume that that's what this is right here because it just looks so different than this black up here. So let's use that pigment black here. All right. Grabbing this, and what we're going to do, there's not a lot of room in here because these are already down here in the foreground. But because this pigment ink is so much darker than that, it affords us the ability to stamp this in here and have separation between the impressions that I'll do now and these impressions. So the fact that this is a lot lighter, right now, alone, it could be a potential weakness because it's the same value here as those other trees in the distance, okay? And having kind of darker foreground imagery is going to create a lot more depth, okay? So we're going to turn this, I don't know, black, 80% gray weakness of that into a strength, okay? Because without it, we wouldn't have so much depth in the foreground right here with a darker medium, okay? So let's try that out here. All right. Being careful here. I'm offsetting a little bit too. I don't want to stamp it like right, over the other impression of it, okay? I'm going a little bit lower because the lower on the horizon you get, it represents something closer to us. That's why these foreground elements are low down here. that depth right there. Those trees. See that? Look what that did. Now, we need to balance it out. By putting some of these over here, okay? Let's go down. Let's offset by about quite a bit. We might be kind of stamping over and not being able to see the previous ones a little bit too, but I'm going to try to offset it so you can. See that like that? Look at that depth right there. Doesn't it create more mood too when you create kind of the illusion of space between the objects, okay? So we're creating separation between objects. Now this one right here, I'll go down about like this. I'll just offset it. So we're going with 3 impressions. Now this alone, even without all that coloring in here, would have extended kind of the textural range. We have something very crisp because it's much more visually apparent, and the value right here going all the way to black here in that 20%. So just that alone would have been a potential visual range improvement in this piece. But look at this piece now, like that. But just look at that foreground right there. You know, with her impressions, her depth that she's created within here. I mean, even that piece alone right there. Look how much depth there is. And then we have all this in the background like that. So now, that is good. We can use something more up in the foreground too, potentially, but she has created those little stars down here. I'm going to avoid the bleed-proof white, because if she doesn't have that, I don't want to do that in here. It's tempting, though, because I think that would be awesome in this piece. But let's stick with kind of a paint pen, or the gel pen that she's using, okay? Now, her gel pen area, now I have colored over a lot of her dots to make them lighter, all right? Or darker. So they're not as apparent, but you can see them as a textural form in there. Those look really nice. She's done a great job on these. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of doing that, I don't know, 15 to 20% increase in something. Okay, so here's a white paint pen. She might be using a different one because her dots are really quite delicate, which is good because you want a kind of a detail, potential effect here. All right, let me see here. Let me see it. I have to be really careful about that for a little bit. So I'm going to highlight some areas in here from the top. Okay, now she has top illumination, and she's created some great lighting in her rocks, okay, by retaining some of the light. But I'm going to increase her lighting on some of these rocks a little bit, okay? And she has done a little bit, but it's kind of a minimal touch, which I do too. I consider mine minimal, but she has done even a lighter touch with it. Okay, so see what I've done right there? I put just a little bit more. I don't know. I'm talking like 15 little dots on top of those rocks, maybe. Okay. So it creates a little bit more lighting on them, like so. All right, now let's add a few more of these dots in here, okay? These will kind of harmonize nicely. Okay, now one of the things I do too with stars, I kind of cluster them. If you notice, this is what everyone does when they're doing dots like this. See how all of her dots are about maybe a quarter to a half inch apart? Everything is completely evenly spaced. We all do that. I do it. I have to fight against doing that. But see this right here? How they're all kind of evenly spaced. Look at this. I think we have kind of this thing in us that creates pattern or something like that. We're looking for kind of order. And I wouldn't say that nature is out of order, okay? But there's much more kind of a less of a defined pattern. That's where you can see the constellations, because some things are, um, stars stand out a little bit more. Okay, now here, I'm going to create some larger dots, so you have variation up in the sky like that now, okay? But look at these dots down here, and let's compare them with, it's like this, okay? Here we go. See that right there? And here. That's a little bit less convincing of being stars, or it could be snow too, okay? So, just kind of group those little stars or whatever. This could be snow down here, or this could be kind of reflections of some of those stars up in the sky. All right? From a textural range, though, too, this is adding kind of a crisp little element, very detailed little element. And what you're doing is you're really increasing contrast, especially if you put a little dot in kind of a darker little spot, like over here, okay? I'm going to go for like a really small one if I can, okay? Something like that. I have to be careful with those diversifying Claire images down there, okay? But look at that still. Let's see if we can do something here. See this lighting right here? Let's see if we can illuminate some of these trees right here. Okay, I'll put a little bit of a highlight on some of these trees. I'll do it on the interior side of the trees, so the lighting is coming from the center here, so I will illuminate these trees on the left side, on their right side a little bit. Few little dots, and these trees over here, the lighting is coming from their left, so I will put some highlights on their left. I mean, you don't have to be perfect with it or anything. It just kind of makes things a little bit more three-dimensional by having that kind of lighting on it like that. See the background, there's that tree back in here. If I can focus in, here we go. And see these ones right here? Look how three-dimensional those look, even though they're just black silhouettes. Now, hopefully it doesn't look like the mites or something. This is looking at a card from, natural kind of viewing distance. We don't look at, like that. But hopefully it does look pretty good like that. In addition to this, right? So that's where these little kind of details kind of come into play. All right? Okay, so that one is done there. Like I said, you can add in a little kind of focal point character in there. That would be good if you wanted to. But now this is drying out here, and I think that is pretty effective in terms of that black being used out there too. Okay, so that is card 1. Let's go to card number 2. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Let me get rid of this page down here. It's kind of creating that little bit of a background. Okay, let's go like this right here. Okay, now this one right here, let's go back to value, okay? We're going to increase this area from like 80% to 100 if we can on here as well, okay? Maybe we'll use the same image right here. All right, so we have some greens in here, fantastic. Now here's one of those things that is done very well in here. There's a lot of things that are done very well in here. The composition, the coloring, and kind of the blending of tones as well. All right. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at right here, this is what I do on all my structures. Okay. On structures, what you get is let's take this for example, or this right here. Okay. This is the same white plastic as on top here, right? Well, this has a sticker, but you can kind of get the idea. But let's take a look at this right now. This object, see how this color is right here? This color? They're the same, right? But look, let's go like this. Okay, now you can tell that this is on a different angle from this because this is darker, right? Same thing right here. This is the same red all around, but let's go like this. Now, what part of the object is light and which part is dark? No matter which way you turn it right here. Because I have overhead lighting in my piece, you know, my studio, right? Is this color red here black? No, it's just a darker version of red, right? See that? So, when it comes to something like that cabin right there, let's expand its kind of visual range. All right, now let's see right here. Let's go with a distress walnut stain. You know, distress inks are kind of darker tones, right? Or you know, they're aged tones, not darker tones. But this one's a darker version of that brown in there. I think. I don't know. It might not be as dark. Same thing that's going to happen with this ink as it sits on here. It's going to dry dull, okay? But we're going to get a good foundation going with it too. Now she has this visual lead-in with this path here being kind of an earthy type of brownish tone too. There's some green in here and blue, I think, which is good because that ties that in with the surrounding area in terms of having a similar color scheme too. All right, so let's go in here. Already it looks pretty good. I think I can use some of this walnut stain in the grass as well, which she has done in here. I can see some of that brown, so that is some excellent kind of blending. All right, so see this right here? Now remember, this is going to dry much, much lighter. I don't think it's going to dry dark at all, okay? Now I'm going right over those that grill in there, which she had kept light, but I think it can use a little bit of a toning. Okay, now see here on our path, I'm going to, you know, keep it a little bit more varied, so I won't tone everything with this color right here. All right, let's put a little bit of this on the roof too, because we're going to go darker yet. Okay, so it looks something like that. Okay, so now we have top lighting in there. I mean, not really, because again, this is going to dry, and it's going to be, it'll look the same, but it'll have a little bit of a warmer tinge to it where I apply this. I'm just kind of, I want to get things a little bit moist before I get into some darker tones, okay? But that's it right there, all right? That's the first color. What did that, I don't know, that took like a minute maybe. This is some brown from Marvy, okay? You can use like a rich cocoa or something like that from Memento, or use other types of distress inks. You know, you can add it in here. I don't know what color she has, so this is like a brown like that. It's kind of similar to the walnut stain. I'm just using whatever I have on hand, and she can do the same type of thing. But see here, I'm going on this path now too. See like that? And it's adding some variation here. It doesn't look too good right now because it's not kind of integrated enough. So let's kind of integrate that a little bit more. See what I'm doing on this path here too? This path goes like this, okay? And what I'm doing, it doesn't have any inherent kind of shading in here, so I'm going like this, okay? Like that. But what do you see here? This is that same type of lighting like that and like that, right? In some ways, it's a little bit more subtle. It's not white and white against black like that. But that's what I'm doing down here to create a little bit of a stronger, varied type of surface, okay? And that creates a little bit more depth when you do that. All right. Okay, so we have that. Now, I have this dark brown right here. I don't want this version of dark brown on that cabin, okay? But the beauty of kind of applications of ink, you can go with like a 5-10% version of that ink by just blotting it off, okay? So let's bring some of that in here like so. I just want to get a little bit of that hue on there to kind of turn the object in space. Now it's a little bit more dimensional that way. Okay. You see that cabin too? That cabin is looking a little bit anemic too. Let's try something right here. Let's go to the, where is my, I'm looking for my distress ink. Here we go. Antique linen, all right? It's not darker than this. It's just kind of a warm, very light hue, okay? Let me just use this top right here. All right, switching up my applicator right here. And I'm going to layer that tone a little bit more. Okay? This is a very good kind of light color to use right here. All right? It's just a little drop right there. We don't need too much. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to layer that over the cabin to just, and let's put some of it down here in the path as well. Okay? It'll just add a little bit more depth and richness to it. Now, it darkened it up here, but again, that's a very light color. It's this color right here. When it dries, it'll just be, you know, it'll practically disappear, but we'll have a little bit more of a warm tinge to it, okay? Let's add it right down here. I think it's really helping the path by kind of amping up the depth and richness of color. See that right in here? See that path right in here? It's kind of glowing a little bit more. Again, it's not going to look like that. It'll kind of dull out a little bit, but we'll try to use that strength, or that weakness, as strength later on with some additional image that we stamp in here. That's kind of like this color right here, right? So you can get a little bit more detailed with some alcohol inks. You can just go right in here. I'm hitting it on the side. You can hit it on the path, in the grass. See, it's kind of warming things up, don't you think? A little bit. Things are looking a little bit dark right now, but again, it should kind of blend in a little bit more. All right, now here, coming around this path, right here. Okay. That's a little bit too greenish, so let's hit it with a little bit more of this brown. Here's a brownish gray. Okay, and we'll kind of mute that down a little bit. Okay, coming around this path, I'd like to have a little bit more shadows, but absence of that, we can add it in ourselves right here. It just puts the onus on you to kind of add it in yourself, okay? In terms of the shading, there's kind of an absence of shading on the design. Okay, kind of hit the under the eaves on the cabin right here, a little bit more. And let's blend this in. I'm just taking a blender pen now, and let's blend that in, okay? All right, now, right in here, we don't have a lot of contrasts. I think she does have the tiny rock stamp, because I thought I saw it in a couple of these pieces. I'm not sure. I think that's it right in there, so let me go and find my little tiny rocks. I usually keep it right on my desk. The problem is that it's tiny, and I lose it sometimes. It's usually around here somewhere, though. Yeah, let me pause the video and go find my tiny pebbles, my tiny rocks. Okay, here it is right here. All right, I'm going to hit this with some brown right here, okay? And I'll just get some different images in here, like about like so, just to kind of anchor that a little bit more. You can even put it on this wood to give it the wood a little bit more wooden kind of texturing. All right, so we have that. All right. Like I said, we'll kind of expect a little bit more mellowing of that too. That actually might look good. Where's our Let's see. Here we go. Let's grab this piece too. Okay. Let's put this out in that water as well. Okay. Let's just go with kind of a dark blue here. All right. See that right there? I just kind of did it in multiple shades of that blue. So it just kind of adds a little bit more texture in there. Okay. Now, let's take this piece. Now, one of the things that's kind of has disappeared in here. Now, I can see that she used the tree cluster. Now, those ones have really disappeared in there. But again, let's use that as a strength, okay? I'm tempted to just use the same image right here in the foreground, which we can do, but let's just go with this one first, okay? The tree cluster. I'm not sure, yeah, is that the larger or smaller tree cluster? I'm not, okay, I think that's the small one. I think it's this one. Okay, now let's take this and let's go with the Claire again. Any type of pigment ink will work, okay? Pigment inks are very surface-oriented when they stamp that in there. So you can really get a good impression, a good surface-oriented impression using these. Okay? I mean, that is quite a profound, oops, difference right there in terms of that black and that one right there, if it was stamped in black, okay? All right. Let's go down here a little bit with that. And let's stamp this one over on the side here. Okay. You know what, I think I wasn't going to do this, but I think this would be a perfect scene to add in a little bit of extra framing to. Let's go in with some leaves here. Okay, these are just leaves, kind of overhanging leaves. So this will represent kind of a tree that's even closer to us. And let's really make this composition kind of pop in terms of contrast, like that. Okay. It's kind of just a nice framing device, isn't it? Like that. Look at this now. We have these down here. Look at that. Just that increase, extra 20% or whatever, going all the way to black. Again, I mean, you know, if something's representing kind of a foggy, misty day or something like that, or morning, you know, you might not have those types of contrast in here, but you know, as far as a visual statement goes, in terms of the potential range of, you know, visible things in here, doing something like that can have a pretty profound effect. Okay, so I was talking about some different types of possibilities in here. This has some, you know, that green grass in here, and some different types of, like, paint pens, you know, can come into play. These are some Sharpie pastels. You know, you can have some gel pens or something like that. I'm not saying you use all of these in conjunction with one another. I'm just saying that these are some possible types of things that you can do in your pieces. All right. I need to shake these ones up here, and then we'll add in some additional little touches in here. I really think that kind of some spray sealing in here would be really quite effective here, just to kind of bring that background up a little bit. Um, this one right here, with all that layering, it has kind of muted things quite a bit. Now we've kind of increased things to keep things sharp in here, but it's missing some sharper elements. It's not going to sharpen up that completely, but it'll make them a little bit sharper. I wouldn't say that they're going to be sharp. They'll still be fairly soft, which in this case could be good because it contrasts against the crisp. You have soft and sharp in terms of the imagery. Okay, now here's a way that you can kind of increase your imagery to sharpness. Okay, now I'm not quite sure which colors I'll use in here, but I'll test some out here first. Okay, so this is a little bit of like an aqua blue or green. Okay, and this might stand out quite a bit, but white would really stand out. Okay, I can barely see it, so that's good. Actually, kind of good. You know, I can kind of get a little bit of a layering down here. I'm adding some little just highlights in in her grass here. Okay. I can't even see it though, so let's move to a lighter one, maybe brighter one. You just kind of keep moving up. I might have to get to white, you know, in order for it to show up. Got to watch out for that that versifying though. Again. Okay, this one's a little bit more of a warmish yellow, and see, I'm kind of just clustering it again in here in the grass area. Yeah, something like that. We have that tree back there too, so I don't want to go over the tree unless it represents lighting on the tree. Okay, something like that. I don't know if you can even see it. I'm working my way up, though. Alright, I touched that little area up there, so we have a little bit of a smear. Who cares? Well, I hope you don't care, Evie. But, alright. Let's go with, I already have this shaken up. The Artistro pen sets also come with a white. Okay, let's go with the white here. Maybe these are Pearly Everlasting or something like that. So it could be reflections, it could be flowers, who knows. Okay, I'll just kind of add it into that little cluster down here. This is a way to crisp up some areas too, okay? Oh, I know it. I know what we'll do on here too. So I'm adding those in like so. Let's add some of this on a couple of these leaves here, okay? You don't have to do too many, just kind of put it on a couple of them, and that'll create a little bit of continuity here. I'll go over my little smear there, and you won't even be able to see the smear anymore because that dot kind of stands out against it. Okay, but this is, I just ran my finger on that again here. There we go, like that. Okay, now I'm going to put some of these trees down here just to, you know, so we create a little bit more continuity between those trees and the other areas in the scene. Okay. Like that. I am really tempted to try some little, I think this crisping up of elements in here looks pretty good. It can use some muting though. A crisp little dot is the perfect complement to a kind of diffused, soft field of light too, which is just taking some pigment ink, okay, and adding it accordingly. This is a fairly dark scene, so I don't want to do too much with it, but let's see what we can do here. Alright, let's just take a cotton ball. And this is a used cotton ball, so this area right here has some kind of dried pigment ink on it, so I'm just going to use this part. I don't want too many folds in it, usually. Alright, so ink up, like so. My Hero Hues pad is a little bit dry, so... Alright, so I just want kind of a nice little muted. I don't want a bunch of blobs, okay? Like I said, this cotton balls are very soft, so if you want a very soft application of media, I suggest using a soft applicator. Does that make sense? So, and you don't want it too blobby, don't go like this into a brand new pad, otherwise you're just going to get a big sopping wet pad to work with. Okay, so let's add a little bit of this down. And see, I'm doing it ever so, slowly or whatnot. Here, let's see. Let's get into the field of view here. Better for you. Okay, so here. I'm adding this down ever so slightly, okay? To create this kind of foggy path way down here. I don't want to do it everywhere, okay? That's not the point. But it's to kind of utilize it here and there. So see how I'm just kind of staying in that area, and I'm just kind of working it out, then I'm going back to center, then working it out like that. Yeah, this is exactly what it needed right here, I think. Now that I add it in. I'm never quite sure, so I just kind of, I dab it around a little bit, and I see if I like it. That's with anything. You just kind of add a little bit and kind of use it a little more. And it happens just, the transformation is happening very slowly. Okay, now see, by adding this fog in here now, to me, one of the things that stands out is the really soft impressions right here now. From a visual standpoint makes sense, okay? Before they were just kind of muted, but adding this in here like that, now it kind of creates that fog, don't you think? Doesn't it seem like a nice contrast against this crisp, dark, against light, soft? And then we have all the little dots in here, which are, crisp as well. Okay, so see here, I've added some light up here. Now we're going to create some separation between our next field. So, thing is, this is going with darker tones of ink, right, to create these light spots. But now, I'm doing these light spots. You can create separation with light by coming in here with a lighter ink and adding it down like here. So you've created this separation between these two areas again. I mean, you can do that everywhere. It could be, if this is a larger piece, I could do it here, 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 here. So you oscillate things. You kind of checkerboard it. This is checkerboarding from a lighting standpoint, but from also a textural standpoint. It goes from soft to crisp to soft to, crisp or whatever. See that like that? Now this looks good to me. I didn't like that pathway down there in terms of how light it was. I wanted it kind of a bolder, but with the absence of it being bold, we can make it kind of soft and a little bit more muted like that. Okay. So we have this. I'm being careful not to go into this. These trees over here, these trees are really wet. Ideally, I would have done this before I put the trees in, but I wasn't thinking about it then. Let's put a little bit over here, too. Let's bring some of that kind of foggy mist over here. See, I kind of fogged it over here, but I have a little space in between it, like so. Put some at the base of these trees over here, the background trees. The trees are on the design itself, but they are in back of the cabin. Let's try to go a little bit up here in the sky. Yeah, in between these branches so I won't pick up any of that wet ink. I could heat set now and kind of go over them, but let's just kind of do this right now. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to apply a little bit more while I'm at it because it does dry much darker. Inks tend to dry a little bit lighter, like dye-based inks dry lighter than what they look when they're freshly applied. Pigment inks look darker um, when they dry than when they were freshly applied and wet. I'm almost tempted to color in those that cabin with some white ink to create an interior lighting in there, but look at this fog in here now. So let's take a look at this closely. Okay. Can you see that oscillation of fog, no fog, fog? You know, I put some right down here to create a little bit more separation, but I think these trees are a little bit more interesting with the low-lying fog. And we have these crisp little dots down here, and the little rock, little fog in here, but look how great that kind of fog looks against those little dots. The dots were a little bit extreme, so I added that in there to kind of mute them down. And then you have your foreground area right in here. Don't those look much closer to you, now that they're real dark? They can be a little bit bigger, though. I would have, ideally you'd use like a larger stamp. Like I could use the leafless pine that I know she has right down in here, and I think that would be really good. It would create a little bit more scale, but I wanted to stick with kind of roughly the stamps that she used in here. I mean, I use those leaves up here because I couldn't take that tree stamp and stamp it up there or something like that. But that just kind of capped things off really nicely, like so. Okay, now one of the things I'm looking at is I think we could, from a vignette standpoint, let me try to use some of this pigment ink. I got to be really careful about this one now, okay? I'll try to do it with finesse if I can. All right, I'm going to stick with the cotton ball on this one and not go with the paper towel because I already have those images stamped out there, but let's try to create a little bit more of a perimeter containment in here, okay? All right, this cotton ball's working great. I'm just going into the scene maybe about an eighth of an inch, and then I move into about a quarter inch. But I do it that when I'm in there a little bit deeper, I go much with a lighter touch, okay? Now see, I'm just staying in this one corner here to get that like so. So see that, doesn't that contain that side a little bit more? And let's do that on all four corners here. So I'm just barely adding any ink with any given tap. It's just that I use kind of repeated taps. Okay, I want my very corner to be pretty dark because those leaves are pretty dark. Okay, see that right there? Doesn't that kind of frame off the piece a little bit more? And down here I don't need to add too much of this because it already has that tree and it's very dark. But let's do it right down here in this corner. This will anchor these trees down a little bit more too. Okay, so just do it with, some degree of finesse. You're just adding kind of a very light shade with any given tap. But let's say you're doing like a 5% shade of gray. So if you do 15 taps, it's 15 times 5 or whatever. I mean, it's getting lighter and lighter with each tap you go, so it's really not that, that type of formula there, but, just kind of add it accordingly. Okay, now I think that really did a pretty good job of framing the piece off. That ink did well. I've never done versifying kind of vignetting like that, but I just did it because that imagery on the edges there was already that, so we have that. All right, that is fun stuff. Let's take a look at this one right here and see how this one's drying here. You see that pigment ink? I don't know if you can tell, but the base of this tree right here is drying a little bit. You probably can't tell too much, but there's the depth still in this one. Okay, now that black is dried up there, but look how much darker that black is. I know we can do that on this one too. I don't All right, I go crazy on these little details. I love doing little details like this. Now this one, I mean, these pieces really didn't need anything, but I mean, these are potential things that people can do. Okay, like I said before, um, if something kind of looks incomplete to the stamper, I'm providing this, potential additional, you know, uh, ideas or whatever kind of video, for that idea. But I love this in terms of watercolor kind of spirit here. I'm going to try not to do too much to this one because I really love what's going on in there already, and I don't want to lose or eradicate any of the things that she already has going on. What I want to do is I want to really kind of enhance what she already has in here, going on in here, which is the spirit of the piece, okay? It's the spirit of the movement of her ink applications. Let's just go a little bit darker on some of the edges here. Shadows to enhance these two spaces in here, which are basically the light and the reflected light, okay? Now I have to be careful down here because I think that is pigment ink, and pigment ink is sitting on the surface of the card, okay? Yeah, it looks like it's pretty well set. I don't need to worry about it then. In other words, I'm not going to blend over it and have it kind of smear. All right, now this is the Marvy number 2. It's real similar to the Marvy Memento Bahama blue, okay? All right, now this is very bright in terms of the blue. All right, so we've done that perimeter kind of application of it. Let's go to a Prussian blue, okay? Let's just amp things up slightly. I don't know, Prussian blue is pretty dark. Maybe it doesn't amp things up slightly, but quite a bit in terms of the value scale. It's pretty dark, like so, okay? Like I said, it'll mute out when it dries, especially on this kind of satiny type of surface right here. Okay, so I've just kind of gone on the perimeter. All right, now, all right, let's get this vignetting done first before I stamp out those darker images in here. I won't have to kind of work around the, stamped wet impressions. Okay, this is going with black. This is going to kind of mute out some of the intensity of the blues that I just added, but we'll have the richness, but without the super brightness, We just want it rich. Okay, so this is just the Marvy black, which will be lighter than the pigment ink black. Okay, we can still add some of that pigment ink black in here. I'm not sure yet, though, but I think so. Okay, 4 corners. All right. Let's go ahead and try it. Let me try some of that VersaFine Clair with a paper towel, okay? Let's see what I'm doing here. Yeah, it looks like it should work pretty good. Okay, no problem. It's kind of nice to be able to just apply this without worrying about kind of smearing imagery. Okay, let's go about a 1/4 inch on the corner, kind of round it up a little bit. Now I'm coming in here a little bit to kind of create that separation between surface and sky, and between light source and reflected light. Okay, so you kind of separate the two areas a little bit like that. All right, so there we have that. Can you see the kind of the framing in here and see how it comes in here a little bit like that? Or a lot like that. All right. Now, let's go with this image again. Okay. And let's go with these darker foregrounds, okay? Like I said, larger versions of trees would be good in here, but let's go with, I know she has this stamp. All right, just the versifying clear, and then we have that real good punch of depth and value impact again by having something just, almost true black in here. But like I said, I mean, if we're doing like, something like a foggy morning, you're not going to have that contrast in there probably. So this isn't for all cases. I think this would be kind of a good choice, for these scenes in here, because they're fairly dark. Okay, so look at that depth right in there. The dye-based ink black against versifying black. Look how much depth we've created. All right, now she is using the leafless pines image, which I love to use in mine too, because it creates that depth and it doesn't obscure. So you get the benefit of the depth without, covering up things in the background. Okay, so let's grab this. I won't stamp a huge portion of it, okay? Let's just go with that. In other words, I have this thing kind of hanging off the bottom. I wasn't going to stamp it way high anyway. Okay. Now she has hers pretty high, but I'm just going to be coming in from the bottom because this represents something closer to us than that one right there, okay? So, go off here on the side, about like so. Who knows, maybe these trees are even closer to us, okay? And let's go right here. I'm just looking to see where it would show, without kind of obscuring my pine tree in the background. But now we have this really dark image reiterated with this back image in here of that same tree. Okay, unless that's the smaller one. That could be the smaller one. Okay, let's see. We get this area in here. Look at that foreground, though. Okay. Here. That's a lot of depth right in there, huh? Alright, so it kind of contrasts pretty well with that background. Let's hit this up with a couple of these tiny rocks in here, just to kind of create a little bit more kind of separation between land and sky. Okay, I'm blotting this off to get some lighter impressions right in here, and I'll go for a darker impression, like straight in the darker areas. Okay, I don't want to just pepper this whole area in here, I just want to create a few little impressions here and there. I think something like that. Let's try a black impression. Okay. Kind of right along the shoreline, maybe. Okay, so that'll kind of, mute out a little bit and blend in a little bit more. Okay, so we have that right there. little bit more color on the perimeter. We still have our same spirit of that kind of real washy, watercolory look. That real kind of flowing spirit of our color applications are being kind of contrasted with some kind of crisp textures in there. Nothing harsh, though, to cover it up. These areas down here that were really quite light, we've added that kind of stronger element of depth in here. Okay, now let's go in. I don't want to do those overhanging tree limbs in here, but let's go into this piece and add in some brighter little crisp kind of highlights, okay? Or stars, whatever they might be. Do a larger one occasionally. In this type of area, we would think. I mean, there's that kind of, it's more like twilight than night because of that glow, but see those little dots in there? How they, I don't know, kind of enhance the sky, like so. Okay. Now, here's a little type of detail right here. Underneath the light, I'm going to cluster in a little bit more lighting in here. Okay. Kind of reflecting that light in my windows. Okay. And then you just kind of dissipate it out here, you know, one little dot. Let's see how, now I've put a little bit more of my white in there. But look at that reflection down there, you know, in the water. From that lighting coming out of the cabin like that. All right, I think that will do it. I hope you liked this video. I hope it came in handy, not just for Evie, but for everyone. Pushing things a little bit more, finding that little extra percentage of things like texture, contrast, you know, and value, can kind of push these pieces that would seem, maybe, you know, that didn't seem finished to me, okay, or to her, in terms of kind of their potential thing. I'm not saying that this is, you know, I've taken it now to the ideal, you know, state, you know, because stamping is, you know, it's you know, it's preferences. You know, you have, you know, your own kind of, you know, we have our color schemes that we like and whatnot. Okay, so I'm trying to. I hope this, you know, comes across as more of like a, you know, kind of a general type of statement in terms of the types of things that we would, you know, consider with our pieces. You know. When you're thinking about things. So it doesn't have to be too much of a kind of obscure thing of looking at a card and kind of thinking, I don't know what it needs. So you can kind of break things down. The temperature and intensity, you know, those two are things that I do consider sometimes, like if I'm doing a blue colored scheme like this, adding a little tinge of warmth in there, it changes the spirit of this piece because now you've taken cool and you've put it over here into warm, okay? It might not be super hot, but you've gone beyond, you know, just the cool range, okay? You know, I think about that sometimes. Now, intensity, yeah, kind of, you know, I'll add in, you know, like a brighter blue or something like that, maybe, especially kind of in the shadow areas. But here's the two things that I'm really considering mostly when I'm doing my scenes. I'm thinking about value a lot. In taking something from kind of real light, and it could be that it's a completely dark scene, but our light is the stars or something like that. So it's completely white, but it's in this little minuscule little tiny dot, okay? But, you know, certainly kind of using something like a pigment ink black or something like that, or just going with the blackest kind of dye-based ink you can find. Now, everyone, a lot of people, you know, when we did this survey one time, what's people's favorite black pads? A lot of people said versifying, in terms of the, not versifying, but stays on, so they don't have to worry about the smearing of imagery or something like that. I've heard people say memory's black. That's a super black, but you better be in an area that it's going to dry very quickly for you because it's a kind of a thick black ink. I don't know if too many people are using memories anymore. I don't hear that anymore. My favorite is the Marvy black because it's kind of a thinner black, not in terms of watery, but the viscosity, but it's super black and stamps very dark. And, it can penetrate things like glossy papers because it's thinner, so, it's not so thick and, staying on the surface. But I don't know, use whatever ones you find. But let's say if you're using one that doesn't get too dark for you, or it dries more like a 80%, 90% gray, you can use that to your benefit by incorporating things like a pigment ink for those foreground images. And that's really super fun to do. Okay, so that textures from going from crisp and hard to soft. Crisp little things like dots. They can be highlighting, they can be snow, they can be stars. Those are really fun to do. I like using white pigment ink in my scenes to create kind of a softer type of effect in terms of like creating fog and mist and clouds or whatnot. Churning water at the base of waterfalls is really fun. And I don't know, just taking things. See this little window in here? I just kind of amped up a little bit more with some additional paint pen in there. It kind of becomes the spirit of the piece in terms of the emotional quality of it by having kind of a lighting, light in the interior of the cabin. We can do one on this one too. I think that would be kind of interesting, but you'd have to kind of dissipate that light because there's a much larger window in here. But we can do that on something like that too. But when you see something like that too, it really draws the viewer into it because when you see kind of it's a dark night or whatever, and you see this light on the interior, we emotionally want to go to that space. So that's an area of adding crisp light into that space right in here. It was a little bit more muted before and soft, which would look good too, but that just kind of amped it up a little bit. And then I've kind of clustered my little highlights down here underneath that water and dissipated them, okay, to create a little bit more kind of a spacing between that light value in there. And of course, the foregrounds of all of these in these pigment inks, I think really served to really push visual depth, to create contrast, and by going dark in these foregrounds, or, overhead hanging foreground, okay, it really made all of these other areas in here that much lighter by contrast, okay? There's still the same, they're darker than what they were when I first got them because I applied more ink on them, but I think they look lighter because of these contrasts in here, okay? And it's really simple to do. You just take a pigment ink and stamp whatever you stamped in the foreground in dye-based ink and do it in black ink too. So what you've done is you've created depth, a lot of depth and space within your foreground area. So it's not just creating space between midground and backgrounds in here. It's creating space just in the foreground themselves, which adds up to visual depth again. And it's fun stuff. Here's the two things I'd recommend that help my scenes out all the time. White pigment ink, doesn't matter which brand, okay, and a cotton ball. I use Q-tips too a lot to get into a lot more specific little areas too, alright? And, like a white paint or gel pen. Those things right there, from a textural standpoint, can really do it. Because they're texture and lighting at the same time, right? Let's take a look at this little Q-tip right here. Remember, just to really blot it off, everyone goes like this, and they have a pad sopping wet with ink. They go like this, and they go right into their scene, or they blot it off, like a couple times, but there's still a ton of ink on there. And then they go like this, too hard, and it's just a big blob of ink. So just really kind of fray your applicators a little bit, get some ink on there, really blot it off, and then lightly dab in and apply it. But the thing is, people can't see anything because there's hardly anything on there, so they really want to expedite it, so they go in there hard, and then they get those blobs. But you just kind of lightly dab in there like this, okay? And think of it like, I don't know, like a 2% application of that white, okay? And here we have, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, you know what I mean, or something like that in terms of the application, because we never want like this big slathering of it, so we just want it in its kind of complete form to be like a, I don't know, like a 20%, application of white at its maximum. I don't know. I mean, it just depends. But see, there's right here. See how I'm kind of adding some over her trees in the background right here, right in the light, and I'll put some of this right in the lighter area down here. Okay. See that tree right there? Doesn't that tree look closer to us now than that tree? So these were trees that look roughly the same in terms of the value, but now I've knocked those ones back a little bit. So those kind of recede in the distance, and I put some of that fog right in the lighting right here. But doesn't that look different than this area over here and this area? Because this is kind of the illuminated area. This is where the light is. So I've illuminated it a little bit more. You can even illuminate this foreground tree a little bit. So we put some little white highlights on it. But you can also kind of knock it down too, in terms of the lighting, softer lighting on it. In addition to crisp. Now over here I wouldn't add too much white on it because this is in a darker area than this one right here. So you add the lights where the light is. Okay, you shade where the shadows are. Alright, that was really fun. I really enjoy doing these types of videos. I love adding little details and little finishing touches on my pieces, so so it's like I had someone do all that preliminary stuff too, which I enjoy doing, but I really get a kick out of the little details and whatnot of pieces. So for me, this is really fun to do too. It's a challenge because, you know what I mean? I just got the scenes as is in their given incarnation. So that's really kind of fun. So don't toss anything out, I always say to people. If there's something that doesn't quite register and you're not quite sure what it is, you can send them in to me. These ones are going to get spray sealed and sent back to Evie. Our collaborative pieces here, and but yeah, don't toss anything out. Let me see. Let me adjust my exposure of my camera so you can see the kind of the colors they are. All right, that's a little bit closer to the color schemes there. We have some light kind of glaring off of it too, but you can see that is roughly how they are. It's catching some of that glare, would be that satin type of finish on there. I think that's a satin finish. I'm not really quite sure. It doesn't look matte to me in terms of that sheen on it, but I don't know. Yeah, don't toss anything out. Send it to me if have a pile in there, or something like that. Or if you're going to trash something, mail it over to me and I'll show you what you can do with them. I've never really seen any scene that to me kind of went completely off course that was kind of unsalvageable. Now that's not this category. These ones look pretty darn good. As is, I liked all of them. But there's just these little touches like that I think kind of can put them over the top. And it was nothing that had gone astray with them. They just needed those little extra touches, I think, in order to kind of, round them into a complete form. And then you'll get them all back, okay? All right, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. And again, thanks to Evie for sending these to me. It was a really fantastic morning for me. And having some stamping collaborative fun. All right, fun stuff.